Okay, hello, good afternoon, and welcome to the Extended Disc mini webinar. And today we're going to be answering some commonly asked questions that you guys have sent in to our askus@extendeddisc.org email. So welcome, Markku, my colleague and president at Extended Disc. Hi, Markku.
Hi, Christina. How are you today?
Good. My name is Christina, as you heard, and I'm the training director here at Extended Disc. We will be recording this webinar in case you miss any of it or like to review it or share it. We'll be posting it on our YouTube channel. Also, we'll be posting it on our extendeddisc.org website. We love your questions, and this whole webinar is about asking questions, but because of the timing of the webinar being only 15 minutes, we've kind of gathered all your questions together, pulled out some of the ones that we saw kind of being repeated or more commonly asked. And so we're going to talk about those questions today. However, we would love to hear from more questions from you guys. So go ahead and put it in the Q&A section or keep using the askus@extendeddisc.org. All right, Markku. So here are just some of the questions that were asked today. And the first question we have here is there a reason why D is red, I is yellow, S is green, and C is blue? And not all disc tools color coordinate the same way that Extended Disc does. However, we do it with a purpose. So there is kind of a scientific theory, color psychology, which works, which has been around for a while. And it is basically thinking about how colors relate to behaviors, what the relationship is. So the reason why we specifically chose these colors is, think of the colors themselves. When you think of the color red, we typically think of strength and power and determination. It's usually one of those bold colors, like, you know, here I am. You know, think about the red sports cars. They want you to know they're there. And we oftentimes connect the color red to the D styles, because D styles tend to be very bold. They want to stand out, and they like to be large and in charge. With the I's, we like to use, or we use the color yellow. Yellow is often seen as kind of very bright and cheerful and positive. It's kind of that sunny color. Attention grabbing, you notice it, you know, that's why taxis are yellow. You know, it's like, hey, you can see it. Just like kind of I styles that we think of tend to be kind of very bright and positive, and they enjoy being the center of attention. S styles, we chose the color green because S's are, the color green often is associated with kind of that earthy nature. It's usually very calm and harmonious and stable. Same thing goes for the S styles. Blue for the C styles, not last but not least, is often seen kind of more of that distant color. You know, you think about the sky, you think about the ocean, it's kind of vast and deep, and we think about it somewhat cooler and deeper and more formal. Same thing with those C styles. Anything you'd add, Markku?
No, Christina, that was perfect. Like, that was good. Very good. And there's a science behind it. And if you Google it, those research, you'll find these colors. So it's a very common, it's not original to us, but we want it to be very consistent. So when people have some different backgrounds, that should be very familiar to them. And people, some of them, especially visual individuals, find the colors easy way to really remember the different styles.
And also, Markku, wouldn't you say that it's not necessarily the colors that relate to each of the styles for us? We did it because of the scientific background of the colors, but not all disc tools use the same colors for their disc styles. Is that correct?
That, as far as I remember, yes, that is correct. There's some different approaches to it, but this is sort of the commonly sort of conventional way of looking at it. So it should be very familiar for most people. That's a great question. And by the way, lots of good questions, and thanks for handling that so well. Next one here, Christina, is about the distribution of the different styles. And I get this question all the time, especially if it's any kind of a training session. You know, what is the distribution? And some people assume it must be 25% in each course and 25% in D and so on. That's not the case. And I think we have some information about the distribution. So thank you, Christina, jumping right there. all over the world, D style is the smallest percentage of the disc styles. If you look at globally, this is 9%, and in most countries, this is right around 10%. United Kingdom has always been one of the highest, but even that has diminished over time because we track this through a global validation study that we do every 2 years. And D style has lower slightly over the last 25 years since we've been doing this. I style, pretty well represented. Actually, I style, if you remember, Christina, used to be the highest percentage for the 4 styles globally because traditionally S style was the highest, but I's were inching up with the younger generation. But now we see at that latest study that it has dropped to globally 28.5%, but you'll see in some countries it is the largest percentage. S style and C style, you can see that distribution as well. So this is for different countries. When we do the validation, there's actually very interesting differences among countries about the distribution of the disc styles. I hope that helps. Christina, do you want to add anything to that?
The only other thing I would add is, these percentages, while they kind of go up and down, they're fairly stable, wouldn't you say, Markku?
They are. I mean, when we talk about generations, changes take over. It's gradual change. But yes, you're absolutely 100% correct. They are quite steady. D's always been as lowest, and I's and S has been pretty even. So yes, absolutely.
I also think as a trainer, if you were to present demographics like this, it actually makes for great discussion, because one thing I always say is that we ourselves don't sit there and analyze why these percentages are the way they are. We just simply present them to you. But it actually makes for great discussions. Well, why do you think, I styles are on the rise? What's the connection to millennials? So it's just something that if you were to use these distributions, we have them available for you.
Yeah, it's also the reason we do a global validation. It's critical to make sure that each individual completes a questionnaire in their native language, which is validated, not literally translated, because really even that we can use this model all over the world, we need to understand the cultural differences. For example that I use often is what the word outgoing means in United States is different than it in Finland, where I'm originally from. Completely different meaning. And even regionally, what does fast-paced mean? Fast-paced in New York City versus somewhere, let's say, like in New Orleans, where I live. Different definitions, but this is the distribution. Again, not 25% needs quotient.
Excellent point. Thanks, Markku. So the next question that we often get asked, or we often hear people say is, oh, this is a personality test, or does extended disc measure my personality? My brief response to it is that we do hear that often, except what I want to make sure people understand is what extended disc actually measures and doesn't measure. What it does measure is behaviors. It is a behavioral tool. And it focuses on behaviors because that behaviors is that aspect of who we are. Even though it sometimes can be very challenging, we can modify our behaviors. And by modifying our behaviors appropriately, we can improve our interactions, which is the end result of why we do extended disc, right? To be more successful. Just as important, if possible, I always try to convey what extended disc doesn't measure, which is it doesn't measure your skills or your values or your attitude or your intelligence. And those are aspects of who you are that make up who you are. And DISC does not measure that.
Yeah, that's correct. We have some different tools that measure those aspects. And I think the term personality profile was kind of started to use sort of casually. People started thinking there are assessments that measure the entire personality. It is a much wider concept, and there is no one tool that can capture all of it. Like you said, Christina, we measure the so-called behavioral style. And really the bottom line is that it describes how we do things, how we react to different kind of interactions with other people and stimuli and environment. And that's what we really want to know, so we can get a clear starting point, our hardwired behavioral response to what happens. And then we can make decisions about how to best interact with others and modify our behavior, because that's, like you said, that's why we are doing this in the first place.
Exactly. All right, Markku, here's one for you. Can
What's
people
that?
trick
Oh.
the DISC assessment?
Short answer, no, you cannot. If you are a client, you know, sometimes you get those results that you don't get a report attached and it says the results are not reliable. And the reason is that the questionnaire in our system has a lot of internal checks and balances to make sure that people really are answering consistently. And if a person is trying to project an image of who they are not, or typically what happens is that we think a person, whoever's asking us to complete the questionnaire, is hoping to get certain kind of behavioral style profile. And I'm trying to project myself and match those requirements or those priorities. And when I do that, I'm going to get confused because the questionnaire really measures that hardwired behavioral style. And not getting too technical, when people try to do that, we get that invalid result. Now, when I get an invalid result, it doesn't mean that they tried necessarily to trick it. There might be some other reasons, and people who have attended our certification knows what I'm talking about, and it's easy to learn. You can look at the profiles and know what's going on. But to answer your question, no, you cannot.
Yay. All right. I think we have time for one more question. So the question here that was asked was, what should I do if my client disagrees with their result? Well, kind of big scope is that when your clients have objections, we need to take the time to listen to them, right? We ourselves need to have the humility to take it seriously, because ultimately there's no one that knows you better than yourself. But what we can do is, if by processing these objections or this kind of feedback that we're getting, it can actually be identified as a blind spot, meaning that they really weren't aware of how they were showing up.
Right.
And oftentimes these blind spots give us the greatest opportunity to develop ourselves, right?
Absolutely, yes.
So
Yeah,
I would say listen to them first. But then we also have some tips, right, on what happens when a client disagrees. Some of those tips might be, we're emotional styles. We might have an emotional reaction to it. Give yourself time. Let yourself kind of process it. Think about what the assessment is measuring. It's measuring your most comfortable way of doing things. Typically, if you think about yourself in your home, but we oftentimes learn to adjust. So one thing I do is when people kind of give me pushback, I say, okay, well, here's one way to think about it. You have a lot of experience right now. You're successful, you are where you are. But how were you when you first started your job? When you were more of who you truly were? You didn't have the experience and the skills that you have now. That's what the DISC assessment tool is showing you, who you truly are. One of the best tips Markku always gives is, if they're giving you pushback, show it to someone who really knows that person, right?
Right.
There's who's going to tell you the truth, like, hey, yeah, this is how you're showing up. Because sometimes it's hard for us to see ourselves as how others see our style.
That's right. We certainly want to be seen a certain way, and when I get somebody's results, and I know Christina, you do this well, you kind of look at the validity indicators. How valid are the results? Because we can easily see that. And one interesting thing is, when people disagree with the results, if you notice that sometimes they disagree only with those development areas. If they agree with all of those strengths, really we have identified their style, but they have those blind spots that you were just talking about. And that's really what, like you said, creates opportunities for development when we uncover those and really begin to think about, now, okay, I see, what do I now need to do differently in order to succeed?
Exactly. Oftentimes I just kind of let them process it, give them opportunities to process the results themselves. And they usually come to their own conclusion. Yeah, I get it. That's how I show up. It happens a lot.
My personal report, when I got it 25 years ago or so, there was one statement. I was like, there's no way that's true. That cannot be true. But the reality is that was one of the biggest aha moments for me in my life, and literally changed the path that I took professionally in many other ways, when I realized that this is not actually, it was actually kind of a misguided belief that I had, but the reality is that it was very different. And I'm very thankful for that. So
All right.
looks
Well,
like we are.
hopefully, anything
But to
you
say
want
we are. To say that looks like we are up for 15 minutes, and I'm telling stories about my past.
Well, we would love to keep answering your questions. We have a lot of them, so just keep sending them in. But we do have a couple webinars coming up next week. We have the Sales Capacity Assessment Suite. It's part of our Summer's SCA series. And this one we'll be focusing on the Team Competence Summary Report, Tuesday, 2 p.m. And then we also will have our very popular and brand new Remote Worker Self-Study Workbook. And that'll be Wednesday, July 15th at 3 p.m.
Yeah, great two topics. And just go to extendeddis.org. On the top right-hand corner, you see Events tab. Click on that. You'll see all of the upcoming webinars. Even if you can't make the date and time, be sure to register. That way we can email you the recording so you can listen to it later, share with your colleagues and friends after the webinar. So make sure you put your details in there.
All right. Thank you guys for joining us, and have a great rest of the day.
Thank you.